Beloved, we are living in a world shaking, nations tremble, hearts grow faint, and the days grow darker, the winds of chaos howl through our cities, and fear whispers in the silence of night. But I declare to you today a truth ancient, eternal, and unbreakable. Faith in God brings peace to the heart. Why does God allow the storm? Why does he not silence it at the first cry of his children? Why does he allow the winds to roar and the waves to rise? The answer is hidden in the mystery of faith, for it is in the storm, not in the calm, that the true strength of faith is revealed. It is not in the ease of sunshine and smooth roads that trust is proven. It is in the fire, in the shaking, in the floodwaters that come in the night. That is where the roots of your soul are tested. That is where what is real, what is true, what is eternal is revealed. The storms of life do not come to destroy your faith. They come to reveal it, refine it, and resurrect it. There is a reason the disciples feared when the storm hit the boat on the Sea of Galilee. The sky had turned black. The waves were higher than they had ever seen. The wind screamed like a beast through the rigging. These were men familiar with the sea, but this storm struck a fear that went deeper. And yet in the middle of that storm, their teacher, Yeshua, was asleep, not pacing, not anxious, not afraid, asleep, in perfect peace, because his faith was not tied to the sea or the wind or the fragile wood of the boat. His faith was anchored in the one who commands the storm. And that's the picture. He was showing them not just his power, but the posture of faith. And what did he say when they cried out to him? Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? It wasn't a rebuke rooted in disappointment. It was a revelation. He was showing them that peace in the storm is not found in the calming of the wind, but in the awakening of trust. He didn't need the storm to stop in order to be at rest. He was already at rest. He was inviting them into that same rest. The storm didn't shake him because he lived from a different kingdom, a higher place. That's what the storm reveals. Not just who we are, but where we dwell. When everything around you is falling apart, when the ground beneath you shakes, what do you hold on to? What do you believe then? That's the test of faith. The shaking is not the end. It's the beginning. Because what can be shaken will be shaken, so that what is unshakable may remain. Storms strip away illusions. They expose what you've built your life on, and if your faith is in things that pass away, money, status, comfort, people, then the storm will take your peace. But if your faith is in God, if your eyes are fixed on him, then though the earth trembles, your heart will not. Do you remember Job? Struck by loss, by grief, by suffering that went deeper than most can fathom. His livestock gone, his servants slain, his children dead, his body afflicted, his friends accusatory, his wife bitter, and yet he did not curse God. He tore his robe, fell to the ground, and worshipped. He said, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." What was that? That was faith revealed in the storm. That was trust stripped of all comfort. That was a man who had learned that peace does not come from what is given or what is taken. It comes from the giver himself. Faith that is never tested is like a sword that's never forged. It may look sharp, but it hasn't faced the fire. It hasn't been shaped by resistance. It hasn't been proven. And God, in his mercy, allows the forging. He allows the wilderness. He allows the storm not to harm you, but to awaken the power of faith that's already within you. Like gold purified in the fire, like wheat sifted on the threshing floor, your soul is being refined. The storm comes not to destroy, but to define, not to weaken, but to awaken. Peter had to step out of the boat. He had to feel the water beneath his feet. He had to take his eyes off the wind and place them on the word. And when he looked at the waves, he sank. But when he looked at the one who walked upon them, he stood. That is the choice every soul must make in the storm. Will you fix your eyes on the chaos or on the Christ? Will you measure the size of your God by the size of the waves? Or will you measure the storm by the greatness of your God? This is the truth. Storms do not cancel the promises of God. They fulfill them, because it is in the night that the light shines brightest. It is in the hunger that the manna falls. It is in the brokenness that the oil flows. And it is in the storm that faith is forged. Peace is often misunderstood. Many people equate peace with the absence of trouble. They believe that when the circumstances are favorable, when everything is in order, when everything is calm, then they will have peace. The world offers this kind of peace, a peace built on the fleeting foundations of comfort and security. But the peace that God offers, the peace that surpasses understanding, is not a peace that is based on the absence of trouble. It is a peace that is found in the presence of God. The world's peace is temporary. It is a peace that can be shattered by the smallest of disruptions. When the winds of uncertainty blow, when trials come, when the unexpected happens, the peace the world offers crumbles. It is a fragile peace, dependent on the state of the world, on how things are going, on how things seem. But God's peace does not depend on the circumstances. It is not swayed by the winds of life. The peace of God is unshakable, eternal, and unchanging, because it is rooted not in the world, but in the presence of the Almighty. We see this in the example of the apostles. When they were in the boat with Jesus and the storm came, they were terrified. The wind howled, the waves crashed over the sides, and the boat was filling with water. They were in danger, and their hearts were filled with fear. But what was Jesus doing? He was asleep. He was not afraid of the storm. He was not worried. Why? Because he knew that the storm had no power over him. He knew that he was the Lord of the storm and that nothing could touch him unless it was by his Father's will. His peace did not come from the calmness of the sea. It came from his unshakable trust in his Father. And this is the kind of peace that he offers to you and me. It is a peace that is not determined by our external circumstances. It is a peace that flows from the presence of God within us. It is a peace that transcends the storm, that holds us firm when everything around us is falling apart. The Apostle Paul wrote, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." This peace, he said, is not just something we have in good times, but something that should rule in us at all times. It is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of the living God that brings peace to the heart. This peace is a deep, abiding rest that comes from knowing that God is with us in the storm. It is a peace that comes from knowing that he is in control, even when everything seems out of control. It is a peace that comes from the assurance that God is working all things together for our good, even when we cannot see the end from the beginning. It is a peace that comes from the knowledge that God is greater than any storm and that he will never leave us nor forsake us. We see this peace again in the life of Jesus. When he was about to face the cross, he told his disciples, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." In the midst of his greatest trial, as he was preparing to face the most horrific suffering, he offered his peace to his followers. And he made it clear that this peace was not like the peace the world offers. It was a peace that transcended circumstances. It was a peace that came from a relationship with the Father, from knowing that the Father was with him and would never leave him. This peace is not a mere absence of conflict. It is the presence of God himself. It is the peace that comes when we are in the presence of the one who holds the universe in his hands. It is the peace that comes when we rest in his sovereignty, knowing that he is in control no matter what happens. It is the peace that comes when we trust in his plan, even when we don't understand it. It is the peace that comes when we surrender our fears, our anxieties, and our worries to him, knowing that he cares for us and that he will never let us go. So what does this peace look like in our lives? It looks like a heart that is steady and calm in the midst of uncertainty. It looks like a soul that is anchored in the knowledge of God's love and faithfulness no matter what storms we face. It looks like a mind that is free from fear and anxiety because we know that God is with us. It looks like a life that is marked by rest and trust, even when the world around us is in chaos. It is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of the one who is the Prince of Peace, who promises to be with us in every trial and every storm. Faith is not merely a set of beliefs, it is a lens through which we begin to see the world from heaven's perspective. When we walk by faith, our eyes are open to a reality that is beyond the natural world. As we walk by faith, our eyes are open to a reality that is beyond the natural world. A world where God's promises are not just words on a page, but active and living truths that shape the course of our lives. The storms of life, the struggles, the trials, they are no longer the defining factors of our existence. Rather, faith allows us to see the divine purposes in the midst of the trials, to perceive the hand of God working all things together for good, even when circumstances seem to tell a different story. When we begin to see through the eyes of faith, we understand that God's perspective is infinitely greater than ours. His plans are perfect and his wisdom far exceeds our own understanding. That is why faith aligns our hearts with heaven's perspective. We may see the storm in front of us as something that will destroy us, but God sees it as a tool he will use to refine us, to draw us closer to him, to build in us a character that reflects his own. The trial may seem endless, but from God's perspective, it is but a moment, a fleeting season in which he is shaping us into his image. Consider the story of Joseph, whose life was filled with betrayal, hardship, and suffering, sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, thrown into prison. Joseph could have easily been consumed by bitterness and despair. Yet through it all, he maintained a faith that was anchored in God's promises. Joseph saw beyond his present suffering. He trusted that God had a purpose for his life, even if he couldn't understand it at the time. His faith aligned his heart with heaven's perspective, enabling him to see that his trials were not wasted, but were part of God's divine plan to save many people from famine. What appeared to be destruction was in in reality the very means by which God was bringing about salvation. Faith brings us into alignment with the heart of God. It allows us to perceive the bigger picture, the eternal perspective, rather than being consumed by the limitations of our finite understanding. When our hearts are aligned with God's perspective, we no longer look at the challenges of life with fear or anxiety. Instead, we see them as opportunities for growth, as moments in which God is refining our character and deepening our trust in Him. We recognize that just as the potter shapes the clay, God is shaping us. This alignment with heaven's perspective does not mean that we will always understand what God is doing. In fact, faith often means trusting in the midst of uncertainty. There will be times when God's purposes seem hidden, when the path forward is unclear, and when we are unsure of the next step to take. But faith assures us that even in those moments, God is at work. He is faithful to His promises, and His plans for us are good, even when we cannot see them fully. Just as the disciples did not fully understand the power of Jesus in the boat, we too may not fully comprehend the depth of His purpose in our lives. But our faith, even in our uncertainty, connects us to the divine wisdom that governs all things. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, spoke of the light and momentary troubles that were achieving for them an eternal glory that far outweighed the struggles they faced. This is the perspective that faith brings. It helps us to see that while our present difficulties are real and painful, they are but temporary. They are but a moment in the eternal scope of God's plan. When we see life through the eyes of faith, we begin to recognize that the struggles we face are not the end. They are not the final word. Instead, they are shaping us for something far greater than we can imagine. Faith, then, transforms the way we view the world. It transforms the way we view our circumstances. Instead of seeing them as obstacles, we begin to see them as opportunities. Opportunities to trust more deeply, to rely more fully on God, and to be conformed more closely to His image. When we align our hearts with God's perspective, we see the world differently. We see the storm as something that will not defeat us, but will make us stronger. We see the mountain as something that will not crush us, but will lift us higher. We see the valley as a place where God is with us, walking beside us, guiding us through. The more we align our hearts with heaven's perspective, the more we begin to experience the peace that comes from trusting in God's sovereignty. The storms of life may rage around us, but within us there is a peace that is unshaken, unmovable, because we know that God is with us, that He is for us, and that He is working all things together for our good. This peace is not dependent on our circumstances, but on the truth that God's perspective is always greater than ours. When our hearts are aligned with His, we can rest in the assurance that He is in control, that He is working everything for our good, and that His plans will not fail. Peace is often seen as a distant reward for those who can somehow master their circumstances, those who can control everything around them. It is a common belief that peace will only come when we can finally get everything in order, when we have enough control over our situations, our relationships, and our future. However, this idea is fundamentally flawed. The true peace that God offers is not the reward of having control over everything. Rather, it is the fruit of surrender and trust. It is not something that comes from the ability to manage the chaos of life, but from the willingness to release our need for control and to trust God with what we cannot change. When we hold tightly to the illusion of control, we are constantly in a state of anxiety, striving to make everything work according to our will. The more we try to hold on, the more we are gripped by fear, the fear that something will slip through our fingers, the fear that we won't be able to fix it all, the fear that things will unravel and we will be left with nothing. But the truth is that control is a lie. We do not have control over the future, we do not have control over people, and we do not have control over many of the things that we desperately try to manage. The more we cling to the illusion of control, the more we find ourselves spiraling into anxiety and unrest. God, in His mercy, calls us to a different way of living, a way that does not depend on our ability to control, but on our ability to trust. He calls us to let go of the reins and to trust that He is good, that He is in control, and that He has a plan for us. It is in this surrender that peace begins to grow. When we release the weight of trying to control everything and place our trust fully in God, we begin to experience the peace that comes from knowing He is in control, even when we are not. This peace is not a fleeting emotion that comes and goes with the changing of circumstances. It is a deep, abiding trust in the goodness of God, even when life does not make sense. It is the peace that comes from knowing that, though we may not understand everything happening around us, God is sovereign, and He is always working for our good. It is the peace that says, I don't know how this will work out, but I know that God is with me, and He will guide me through. This peace is not dependent on external circumstances, but on the internal truth that God is faithful, and that His ways are higher than ours. When we trust God fully, we no longer need to control the the outcome. We no longer need to manipulate situations to get what we want or force our plans into being. Instead, we can rest in the knowledge that God is in control and that His plan for us is far better than anything we could orchestrate on our own. We begin to see that peace comes not from being able to manage everything, but from trusting that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating everything according to His will. This is where true freedom is found. The moment we stop trying to control everything is the moment we begin to experience the freedom that comes from trusting God. We are free from the weight of worry, free from the burden of trying to make everything perfect, free from the constant need to make things happen on our own. Instead of being bound by our need for control, we are liberated by the peace that comes from surrendering our will to God. In this freedom, we find peace that transcends the chaos of life. There is a powerful example of this in the life of Jesus. He came to earth not to control everything, but to surrender His will completely to the Father. Even in the most agonizing moment of His life, in the Garden of Gethsemane, when He faced the reality of the cross, He surrendered His will to the Father, saying, "Not my will, but yours be done." In this act of surrender, Jesus found peace in the midst of unimaginable turmoil. He knew that, though He did not have control over His circumstances, He could trust in the goodness and sovereignty of God. His peace came not from control, but from complete surrender to the Father's will. When we follow Jesus' example of surrender, we too can find peace in the midst of life's struggles. Peace does not come from our ability to control what is happening around us. It comes from trusting that God is in control, that He sees the bigger picture, and that He will never leave us nor forsake us. The more we surrender our need for control and place our trust in God, the more we experience His peace in our hearts. It is a peace that is not dependent on our ability to manage the storm, but on the presence of the one who calms the storm. True peace is the fruit of trust in God. It is the peace that comes when we let go of our attempts to control and surrender our lives into His hands. It is a peace that surpasses understanding because it is not based on the circumstances, but on the unshakable truth that God is good, He is in control, and He will make a way. The more we trust Him, the more peace will grow in our hearts. True peace is not found in the absence of conflict or the resolution of every problem. It is found in the presence of God, in the awareness that He is with us no matter the storm. This is the kind of peace that Jesus offers to His followers, a peace that doesn't depend on perfect circumstances or the absence of challenges. It is a peace that exists because of His presence, a peace that transcends understanding, a peace that guards our hearts and minds in the midst of life's most difficult moments. When Jesus walked the earth, He demonstrated this peace in a way that was unlike anything the world had ever seen. In the midst of opposition, suffering, and eventual death, He remained calm, steady, and focused. He was never shaken by the circumstances surrounding Him. He was fully aware of the struggles and the challenges that lay ahead, yet He was able to maintain a peace that flowed from His deep connection with the Father. This peace was not rooted in His external circumstances. It was rooted in His relationship with God. Jesus knew who He was, He knew what His purpose was, and He knew that He was under the protection and the will of His Heavenly Father. And because of that deep connection, He could experience peace even in the midst of suffering. In John 14:27, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." These words are not just a gentle comfort, they are a declaration of the kind of peace that only He can give. The peace that Jesus gives is not the peace that comes from the absence of trials or the elimination of danger. It is a peace that comes from knowing that God is with us, that He is in control, and that no matter what happens, we are secure in His love. This peace is not something we can achieve on our own. It cannot be manufactured by positive thinking or human effort. It is a gift from God. The kind of peace that Jesus offers is not just the cessation of conflict. It is the presence of His Spirit in our hearts. It is the inner calm that comes from trusting in God's sovereignty, knowing that He is working all things together for our good. He, even when we cannot see how. This peace is not a fleeting emotion that comes and goes based on our circumstances. It is a steady, unshakable foundation that remains with us through every season of life. The world often seeks peace in external things: comfort, security, relationships, success, or control. Yet these things are temporary, fragile, and unreliable. They can give us a sense of peace for a moment, but they cannot provide lasting peace. When the storms of life come, when trials arise, When we face uncertainty or hardship, the peace that the world offers crumbles, but the peace that comes from God is different. It does not depend on the external circumstances. It is a peace that comes from knowing that God is with us, that He loves us, and that He will never leave us or forsake us. It is a peace that remains even when everything else seems to fall apart. This peace is the peace of surrender. It is the peace that comes when we stop striving to control everything and start trusting that God is in control. It is the peace that comes when we release our grip on the outcomes and place our trust in God's perfect plan. When we surrender our anxieties, our fears, and our uncertainties to God, He gives us His peace in return. It is the peace of knowing that He holds our future, that He is working for our good, and that nothing can separate us from His love. In the book of Philippians, Paul writes about this peace, saying, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." This peace is not something that we can fully understand with our human minds. It transcends understanding. It goes beyond what we can comprehend because it is rooted in a reality that is greater than anything we can see or touch. It is a peace that guards our hearts and minds, protecting us from fear, anxiety, and doubt. It is the peace that comes from trusting in God's wisdom, His love, and His perfect will for our lives. This peace is available to all who trust in God. It is not reserved for a select few or for those who have their lives together. It is available to all who come to God in faith, who surrender their worries and anxieties to Him, and who choose to trust in His goodness. It is a peace that is freely given, not because of anything we have done to deserve it, but because of God's grace and love for us. In every season of life, in every trial and difficulty, we can experience the peace of God. We may not always understand what is happening around us, but we can have peace knowing that God is with us, that He is in control, and that He will never abandon us. This peace is not just the absence of trouble. It is the presence of God in our lives, guiding us, comforting us, and reassuring us that He is with us every step of the way. In a world filled with uncertainty and turmoil, the pursuit of peace is often an elusive journey. We search for peace in countless places, from material possessions to fleeting relationships, hoping that these will bring the lasting comfort and tranquility we desire. Yet time and again, we find that the peace the world offers is shallow and temporary. It is based on circumstances, on what we can control, and it vanishes as quickly as it comes. But there is a peace that is far deeper, far more enduring, a peace that is found only in the presence of God. This peace is not the peace that comes from everything going well. It is the peace that holds steady even when everything around us is falling apart. It is the peace that transcends understanding, the peace that comes from knowing that God is sovereign, that He is in control, and that He is working all things for our good. When we speak of peace, we are not merely referring to the absence of conflict. True peace is not just the end of struggle or the cessation of hostility. It is something deeper than that. It is an inner calm, a quiet confidence, and a steady assurance that God is with us no matter the circumstances. This peace is rooted in our relationship with God, in our trust that He is faithful and that He is working out His purposes in our lives. It is the peace that comes when we surrender our fears, anxieties, and worries into His hands, knowing that He cares for us and that He will never leave us or forsake us. Jesus understood the depth of this peace, and He offers it freely to all who follow Him. In the Gospel of John, He promises, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." These words are not just a gentle reassurance. They are a powerful declaration. The peace that Jesus gives is unlike any peace the world can offer. It is not the peace that comes from achieving success, from resolving every problem, or from eliminating every source of stress. It is the peace that comes from knowing that God is with us, that He is guiding us, and that He is in control of everything, even when the world seems out of control. When Jesus spoke these words, He was preparing His disciples for the challenges they would face after His death. He knew that they would experience hardship, persecution, and fear. Yet He was not giving them a peace that was based on their external circumstances. Instead, He was offering them the peace that comes from a deep, unshakable trust in God's sovereignty and faithfulness. The peace that Jesus offers is the peace that allows us to stand firm in the face of adversity, to remain calm in the midst of chaos, and to rest in the assurance that God is with us no matter what. This peace is not a one-time gift. It is something that we must choose to embrace every day. We live in a world that constantly bombards us with reasons to worry and fear. There is always something that threatens our sense of security, whether it's financial struggles, relational difficulties, health concerns, or the uncertainty of the future. In the midst of these challenges, it is easy to become overwhelmed, to lose sight of the peace that God offers. But the peace of God is not something that we can attain by our own efforts or through our ability to control the circumstances around us. It is something that comes from trusting in God's promises, from surrendering our need for control, and from allowing His presence to fill our hearts. To experience the peace of God, we must first acknowledge that we cannot control everything in our lives. We cannot control the people around us, the events that unfold in the world, or the challenges that come our way. We can only control how we respond to them. When we choose to surrender our fears and anxieties to God, when we place our trust in His ability to work all things for our good, we begin to experience a peace that is not dependent on our circumstances. It is a peace that comes from knowing that God is greater than any problem we may face, that He is working behind the scenes, and that His purposes will ultimately prevail. This peace is not the absence of suffering or difficulty. In fact, Jesus never promised that we would live lives free from trouble. On the contrary, He told His disciples that they would face trials and tribulations, but He also assured them that they could take heart, for He had overcome the world. The peace that He offers is not a peace that shields us from hardship. It is a peace that enables us to endure hardship with grace, to stand firm in the face of adversity, and to remain confident in God's goodness, even when things don't make sense. When we embrace this peace, we are able to navigate life's challenges with a sense of calm and assurance. We are no longer ruled by fear, anxiety, or worry. Instead, we are anchored in the knowledge that God is with us and that His peace will guard our hearts and minds. This peace does not come from our own strength or ability. It comes from a deep trust in God's character and His faithfulness. It is the peace that comes when we let go of our need to control everything and surrender our lives into His hands. In the midst of the storms of life, we can choose to rest in the peace that God offers. This peace is not fleeting or fragile. It is a deep, abiding peace that can withstand any trial. It is the peace that comes from knowing that God is in control, that He is with us, and that He will never leave us. It is a peace that transcends understanding, a peace that fills our hearts and minds, and a peace that enables us to live with confidence and joy no matter what challenges we face.